I'm not going to come in here swinging like I'm some Armored Core expert, right? I maybe touched an Armored Core game once in my life years ago. I came into Armored Core 6 basically fresh-faced, From Software kid, Dark Souls fan, looking to see what they got next. And I was not disappointed with Armored Core. I thought Armored Core 6 was really fun. It looked really good, it played really well, it had a pretty good story overall, and I thought the music was good. What I thought made the gameplay really enjoyable for Armored Core 6 is the customization. You have tons of different guns and shoulder missiles and arms and legs and chest pieces and whatever to mix and match and switch between. Now, while plenty of people have taken the time to make their favorite Gundams and make wacky little horror monsters or whatever, for me, I just enjoyed being able to build and customize a mech that played the way I wanted to play. Armored Core gives you all these different weapons that I had a great time just trying out and testing to see what I liked for what situations, what were my favorites, what worked, what didn't work, and there's a bunch of different types of weapons. It's not just big giant guns, but it's giant laser guns, beam guns, shields, energy barriers, pulse guns, whatever, and that was all very cool. I think it was all very good and very well done. They constantly are putting you in situations where different guns would be beneficial. Close range, long range, things with high mobility, low mobility, whatever, and I think that's pretty cool. I actually felt as I was playing the game, I was becoming better. I was progressively improving as a gamer, but not just mechanically speaking, but also intellectually, in the sense that I was being able to construct better and more functioning mechs. I want to keep calling them Gundams, better and more functioning ACs, and I thought that was really good. I felt like I was becoming a better pilot as I was getting better at maneuvering and handling different situations as the game progressed, and that I felt to be a very strong point in Armored Core 6's favor. Another big point for the game is the voice acting. So you never really see another human being in the game. You basically just see robots the whole time. However, a lot of the story is carried by its voice acting and text logs. And while the text logs are fine, they do well enough, the voice acting really carries the entire narrative. And I thought the voice acting was fantastic, with some of my favorites being Cinder Carla, G1 Michigan, and of course V4 Rusty being particular standouts. I think the voice acting adds a lot of personality. It really made me like and care about some of these characters, even if I only saw them and interacted for them for very small amounts of time, particularly in the 20 to 30 hour runtime that is Armored Core. I played Armored Core on PS5 and I played on a controller, and I didn't know that you could adjust the sensitivity on the controller, which is dumb. It's my fault. I messed up there. But even after adjusting the sensitivity, it still felt like enemies were constantly dashing out of my line of sight, like above my character's head or quickly behind me, which made the game pretty disorienting at moments. And I also felt like the lock-on was probably my biggest frustration. The last boss of New Game Plus, the third playthrough of the game I did, my lock-on, and I switched lock-on options a bunch to see if this would work, just sometimes wouldn't lock onto them. And I found that to be incredibly frustrating. This is probably the angriest I've been while playing this game, is that sometimes I will hit an enemy at point blank range, and then when I go to hit the enemy with another weapon, the lock-on decides to target an enemy all the way off in the distance. Going on a little bit more, the game is kind of broken down into these missions, and these missions usually just involve you showing up and killing a few mechs. Maybe you fight another Armored Core, but occasionally you'll have to fight bosses, and the bosses, I would say, are the highlight of the game, with the first two bosses being notoriously the hardest. And while the bosses are hard, I think they are specifically more difficult because they require you to play a little bit differently. You can't just go in and shoot your big scary weapons at them without thought, but also the weapons you have in the early game are not as big or as scary as what they become later on, particularly after you beat Chapter 2. There's been a lot of conversation about Armored Core 6 and more specifically its difficulty. While some people are saying the game's way too hard, and then others are saying the game is way too easy, you have my sympathy for the people who think the game is too hard. I really want to focus on this concept of the game being too easy as a conversation point, because what I've been seeing is folks go in, they start getting all of the good items, and then they use nothing but a good build. Now, if you can make and customize your Armored Core to look however you want, and when you get that AC looking and feeling the way you want it to look and feel and play the way you want it to play, that's great. And I understand if that's the way that you like it. However, much like the Souls games that I think is and isn't fair to compare Armored Core to, the Souls series lets you modify your difficulty. Armored Core 6 is no different. I think if you made a very strong, powerful mech that you are not having fun with because it is trivializing the game, then you should probably switch to a different build. You know, the idea for difficulty isn't you play on a harder difficulty to prove you are a better gamer. You play on a higher difficulty, a higher or harder difficulty, so that the game is enjoyable for you if you found it too easy on a lower difficulty. The point of games is for people to enjoy them. And so if someone has a very powerful build, but maybe they're not as good at the game as others, all that matters is that it's a reasonable challenge and that they're enjoying the game. Or if somebody doesn't like challenge at all and they just want to have the creativity to build what they want to build and they're happy they built the best, most overpowered AC they could and then just sweep through the entire game, that seems totally fine as long as they're having fun. But for me, if you build a very powerful, extremely overpowered Armored Core mech and then you sweep through the game and then you complain that the game was too easy, to me that is not a very fair complaint. Because you didn't have to make the game easy. You chose to make the game easy. You chose to continue to make the game easy. For me, I don't think that's particularly fair. The game does have adjustable difficulty. You can make the game harder if you want to. After I beat the game, and even while playing the game, I felt like the story in Armored Core was kind of hard to grasp. You know, I didn't super get what Drew, the player, was supposed to be motivated to do, narratively speaking. They kind of offer these little decision missions, which is the game's hint that there are multiple endings. And I didn't feel strongly about any of these decisions being made because I didn't know what the character was really supposed to want. And I didn't particularly feel strongly about any of the motivations between any of these factions. They were all greedy corporations to a greater or lesser extent that just kind of wanted to use me to kill people. After beating the game on New Game Plus or whatever and getting all 3 of the endings, I can safely say that my opinion hasn't super changed. I understand more of the story now, but I still don't really get my character's motivation in all this. And I still never felt super strongly towards any ending or any corporation that my character was going to side with. I don't necessarily consider it to be a spoiler to say that there are multiple endings because the game kind of only hints at there being multiple endings. So I will say that if you beat Armored Core, that you should play it again. It took me roughly 19 hours to beat the first playthrough of the game, and then I beat the other 2 playthroughs in under 10 total. I beat the game in roughly 30 hours to get all 3 endings, and one of the cooler parts is when you play on New Game Plus, levels start changing, and, you know, cutscenes are a little bit different, bosses are different, and then when you play on New Game Plus, even more levels and bosses are different, so that's cool. I like that they keep things different and fresh, and to me, I thought that was very good and fascinating. Big fan of that. Overall, I really enjoyed Armored Core 6. I like weird games. Armored Core 6 is weirder than the average stuff that AAA games put out, and it gets put into the big gaming sphere that people pay attention to. I'm very happy with it. I thought it was a good time, and I highly recommend that you check it out. Alright, I'll probably end on my favorite scene of the game. It's during the Chapter 3 boss fight called Ice Worm, and this scene is just very cool, which is why I like it. The boss is not particularly hard. I just think this scene's fucking dope.